Welcome, everyone, to the Pathways to Native Business Plan Development and Sustainability. This is part one of two parts. My name is Christine Celentano. I work for Tribal Tech, and we work with the Office of Indian Economic Development, Division of Economic Development, providing training and technical assistance. We're really pleased to have you all here, so thank you for coming. So today the webinar will be recorded and everyone will stay muted during the presentation. There will be questions and answers during the course of the presentation, and we have slides to indicate when that is. But in the meantime, if you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat to be answered during those times. So you can put those in anytime. The slides in the recording will be made available to participants after the presentation. The recording takes a little bit, so we have all your information. We'll definitely get the recording out to you once it's prepared and ready for sharing. At the end of the presentation, there'll be a survey link that we'll put into the chat, and we'll appreciate you completing that before you leave today. So now I'm going to turn it over to Denise Litz. She is the Office of Indian Economic Development, Division of Economic Development Branch Chief. Denise?
Shawana Skenahay, greetings everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Business Development and Sustainability two-part series. We're excited to have you all here. Before we get started with our content, I'd like to open up our meeting in a good way. So I'm going to turn this over to Jim Henry, who is our Economic Development Specialist. He's Maidu, and he will be doing a traditional opening for us. Jim?
Good morning. Greetings, my relatives. How are you doing? I am fine. Welcome and greetings from the traditional homelands of the Cahuilla people. I am contacting you from my duty station, which is located in Palm Desert, California. I am Maidu and a citizen of the Enterprise Rancheria, which is located in Northern California. In preparation for this opening, I asked my ancestors for guidance, and they said, speak from the heart and the words will come. So as we prepare for this, please prepare yourself for prayer. Kodoyapem, which is our creator, we thank you for all that you provide, your guidance and your care. We are gathering for 2 days this week to expand our wisdom in this world of business plan development and sustainability. As a provider for your family, we want to create a place where you can make wise investments to avoid risk. During this event, we ask the Creator to open our minds, to learn about the possibilities, to listen with open ears, and to communicate freely with questions. We thank the Creator for our teachers who share the knowledge, our leaders for their guidance, and ourselves for the warrior spirits within us. Oh, amen. Thank you. Back to Denise.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim. Next slide. So I wanted to take an opportunity to introduce ourselves. My name is Denise Litz, and I'm the Chief for the Division of Economic Development. I'm originally from the Tuscarora Nation. We're located about 10 miles north of Niagara Falls, New York. And our director, Anna LeBeau, had another commitment, but she sends her best wishes for this webinar and is very appreciative of everyone joining. Anna LeBeau comes to us from the Omaha Tribe of Nebraska and is the director for the Office of Indian Economic Development. Next slide, please. So we have two teams that we are working with, the Economic Development Specialist team and the Grants Management team. Next slide. So let me introduce our Economic Development Specialist team. You've already met one of them, Jim Henry, who's he covers the Northwest Zone. We also have Janelle Green, who covers Alaska and the Southwest Zone. And then we have the Eastern Zone covered by Rebecca Horsechief. Next slide, please. And our Division of Economic Development also has a grants management team. So Elizabeth Callahan is from Choctaw Nation. She's our program specialist. Dennis Wilson is Taos Pueblo and is our lead grant management specialist. And Melanie Welsh is Alaskan Yupik Eskimo and is our grants management contractor. Next slide, please. So we are also joined by our Tribal Tech team. They provide tech training and technical assistance to our office. So Christine Celentano is the Training and Technical Assistance Project Manager. Terry Rose is chalked on. She's the Events and Logistics Specialist. And Kelly LaChance is from Confederated Tribes of Siletz and is the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator for as the Native Language Specialist. Next slide, please. We are pleased to announce that we are also joined by the Administration for Native Americans Technical Assistance Team. We have Rondell Clay, who's Sisitim Wapiti Oyate. She's the Regional Director. And Dan Van Otten is Cayuse, and he's the Training and Technical Assistance Consultant. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn this back over to Christine. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Okay, so the goal of today's webinar is to increase participant confidence in business plan development from preparation, planning, writing, sustainability, and next steps. An overview will be provided on logistics for business plan development. We'll dig into essential components of business planning and finally wrap up with resources today to help further develop your planning efforts. We'll include information also on various assistance providers, templates, and development resources, which we'll make available to you after the webinar. Next slide, please. That brings us to part one, objective one. Here we're going to provide an overview of preparation and planning logistics for business plan development. And I'm going to turn it over to Dan Van Otten to get us started.
Thank you, Christine. Klahalia, close telecom. So we're gonna start with a discussion of community engagement in business plan development, and that discussion will include an overview of how that involvement can take place in creating and managing tribally operated enterprises and Native community corporate businesses. Those corporate businesses can be tribal corporations, or they can be Native community corporations. We have the ability to do that in our urban communities. We'll take a look at how to engage the community in building longer-term strategies for business development and economic development. And we'll touch on how the community can participate in planning and supporting individual entrepreneurial private ventures. And we'll next take a look at the range of community involvement activities and how those activities can be sequenced to be inclusive of community members and also provide valuable information on market demand and organizational considerations. Our discussion of involvement strategies begins with activities that engage the entire or a substantial component of the community and provide more generalized recommendations and information on venture development. And then we'll look at processes that involve community members in refining those concepts that can be used for business plan development. And finally, we'll take a quick look at the role community involvement plays in tribal and community corporation and in strategic planning. And we'll finish with a discussion of community engagement with individual entrepreneurial ventures. So I need to let you know that in my visit with you, I'm going to use the terms venture and enterprise and business interchangeably. So be aware of that one. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and launch a quick poll. You'll have about 30 seconds or so to answer, and we'll go ahead and share the results with you. So the poll is, what is your level of experience in developing a business? Does everyone see the question? Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. We'll see. Okay, it doesn't look like it actually launched correctly. We'll go ahead and get that information from you here soon. Not sure why that didn't launch. We'll go ahead and move on then to the next slide. And this is Dan.
Okay, questions to consider. So what do you have as a business idea? and where does that idea come from? How was that idea developed? What kind of market do you know that you have? And how will you tap that market? What percentage of the market will you be looking to try and capture? What is the overall the set of economic objectives that you're working on, that you want this plan, this business idea and your business plan to fit into? And what are my starting points? How do I get going with this thing? How do I begin the process of business development? Next slide, please. Okay, so our involvement in business development has a number of aspects to it. One of them is in creating the structure that's going to be used for business development. Engaging the community, and I'm going to talk mainly in this opening session about, or section of the session, I'm going to talk about community involvement in business development, venture development, business plan development, and business organization development. And that's just an essential part of the puzzle, maybe one of the biggest pieces. We don't pay enough attention to it. So engaging the community in developing the structure of the organization tasked with economic development work that benefits the community is an essential starting point. Top-down decisions that are based on what's best for the community, and we've seen that happen a lot, or I've seen that happen a lot, often result in economic development organizational structures the community doesn't understand or support. So we want the community to be involved in that process. Creating strategic plans, creating a 3 to 5 year strategy to guide business and economic development gets us out of the reactive fly-by-night environments that can permeate and do permeate economic development and the business development discussions and operations in our community. And having that plan is just critical. For a number of years, I was a commissioner on a tribal economic development commission. We had a well-crafted strategic plan, but we kept getting these wonderful concepts thrown at us, business concepts thrown at us, creating a utility pole industry using recycled tires, and working with a horse trailer operation, and marketing that horse trailer operation. Okay, I'm getting some background noise. It's really important to involve the community in strategic plan development, and stick with that strategic plan, regardless of all of the wonderful ideas that come floating into you, and they will come floating in as time passes. And then individual ventures. If the plan deals with a community member or members that are planning the creation or expansion of a business, community involvement can help clarify marketing decisions as well as such factors as potential labor force issues. So next slide, please. Cool. All right, then. Here we have processes for business planning and preparation, community engagement processes. This is an overview of community engagement processes, and the first four of them, meetings, surveys, focus group, nominal group, those first four generally are part of the initial planning activities that go into creating a well-structured business plan. The steering committee, those of you that have suffered through one of my pre-application or project and planning development workshops in the Western region, you know, I really make a big point about steering committee. Steering committee should be created and should continue to operate throughout the entire planning process, and into the implementation of the venture. We'll talk about each of those in detail. Next slide, please. All right. So we're beginning with processes they're really inclusive, that document larger community perspectives and involve the community in those priority and perspective statements. But community meetings, go to existing community gatherings, Head Start, elders, culture committee, whatever we've got in terms of community meetings going on, general community meetings, general council meetings, as well as holding meetings in the community. When you do sponsor a meeting, make it an enjoyable, attractive, accessible event. Provide food, childcare, transportation assistance, door prizes. Being inclusive and getting general themes is the purpose of these meetings. And I've been to some meetings that were put on by some of the tribal entities on the coast here in Oregon that have just really blown me away in terms of how welcoming and how feastifying they are. Just wonderful table spreads, community turning out for those meetings, participating in those meetings. Being inclusive and getting general themes is the purpose. Is providing employment a major area of interest? Is that one of the themes that comes out? Are there microbusiness operations in the community that want support in their operation? Is that a theme that comes out? Be sure to keep documentation on what suggestions, recommendations came out of the discussion, who made what comment, and whether there were statements that had substantial support. Keep that documentation. Next slide, please. So community surveys can be the next step in community engagement strategies. The first steps in this process focus on trying to reach as many community members as you can. Community meetings, community surveys, inclusivity, that's what we're looking for. You'll often discover some themes through these community engagement processes, providing more accessible goods and services to community members, creating employment opportunities for community members. Use information you gathered through the community meetings that you've held to create survey questions. Build surveys with open-ended and closed-ended questions. So an open-ended question, example of an open-ended question could be list 3 businesses we could help start that would provide needed goods or services to community members. Space for the respondent to list those ventures. Gets the information from the community that the community's thinking about. A closed-ended question could be something like, rank the following potential businesses from 1 to 5. Which of them do you think would be most successful and sustainable in its operation? Then you'd have a specific list of 5 options, and people would choose which was the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. So you'd be getting information that you could use that came out of some of your planning processes to test with the community what their priorities are. Surveys could be targeted. You could send surveys out to the general community or to specific subsets of the community with some identification coding to show which segment of the community the survey went to, came back from, and incentivize participation. Do tear off tags that will be detached from a returned survey and dropped into a sealed container, and then there'll be a drawing and the winners will get grocery baskets and blankets and other prizes. And document the results. Do good documentation. Okay, next slide, please. Focus groups. So now we're moving into a more selective and targeted approach to dealing with our planning process, our community planning process. And a focus group has specific focus discussion topics. It's composed of members of the community who represent different interest groups like elders and families with children and businesses, youth, potential partner entities. Try to stay at sort of a 10-member maximum. Don't get huge groups. The group's composition and the group discussions are planned to create an open environment, non-threatening environment in which folks feel free to talk. Members are encouraged to express their opinion. Get group buy-in on the length and number of meetings you're going to have. Have a group facilitator. It's really important, and that facilitator can come from your organization, or you can bring in some sort of outside person, neutral party. A focus group discussion, discussing possible business developments in the community often will start with topics that came from community meetings and surveys. Make sure people's ideas don't get lost. Someone should be writing down what's said in the same way as taking minutes at a meeting. Arrange for this in advance. Get a recorder set up. The product of group work should be a set of interpretations and conclusions regarding potential venture developments. What patterns come out of that discussion? What are the common themes? Are there new questions that come out of that discussion? And what conclusions seem to result regarding specific venture concepts? Not just the venture concept, but the priorities, priority list of venture concepts. And because focus groups are structured and directed, but also really pretty expressive, you can get a lot of information in a relatively short period of time. But I really encourage you to start with inclusive processes and then move down to these more focused processes. Next slide, please. All right, the nominal group process. This is one of my favorites, actually. The nominal group process, it's a variation of the focus group, and it involves creating 3 or 4 groups that meet concurrently, and their composition is similar to that of a focus group. And each group designates a recorder, somebody who's going to be writing stuff down. There's an overall facilitator who gives the groups a written statement of 2 or more findings that came from community surveys or community meetings or focus group deliberations. An example of a finding could be something like the most promising business development opportunities with markets in our community are, and then a list of those opportunities. Or something like our community or tribal corporation should explore ventures in. Each group gets a different set of findings. Everybody's not doing the same set of findings, okay? So you're going to have 3 or 4 groups, each of them moving through a set of findings and responding to those findings, building a set of responses on those findings. And so folks write down their ideas about those development areas without chatting, without discussion at that point. And then after everybody has their notes in place, they discuss their ideas. The recorder writes down all of the comments on the findings they have on a flip chart for the entire group to see. And after all those ideas have been recorded and reviewed, members discuss them, and each group chooses its top venture priority areas through a voting process. And then you're going to have, this is going to be something where you want to have some breaks. Yeah, you're going to feed folks, you're going to have a nice lunch for them. It's going to be something, not just a work session, it's going to be a social session that has some work associated with it. So each group chooses its venture priority areas through a voting process, and then each group facilitator reports the group's priorities to the entire meeting. And the entire population then votes to determine the top, let's say, 5 venture priorities. From those findings, the top 5 venture priorities that could or should be explored. And discussion sort of continues on methods to move forward with selected priorities. And it's used to, this is all used to develop business plan components. It's a really valuable tool that can be used in developing business plan components. Okay, next slide, please. Steering committee, one of my favorite things. Steering committee should include a cross-section of the entities with a stake in the business operation. Community members, potential customers, organizational leadership, staff, potential partner organizations, all should be represented on the committee. Some of the membership may come from participants in the nominal group process. The committee has an advisory role in business plan development. Its membership can change as different components of the plan are being developed. For example, a representative from a local lending institution might be connected to the steering committee when financial and marketing components of the plan are being developed. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but marketing is something where we do a really great job of production, and we aren't quite so good at marketing. When we are creating our business plans, really focus on how to develop an effective marketing strategy and one that we can clearly implement. So steering committee members review all business plan content. Sorry, not all steering committee members. Not all steering committee members will review all business plan content, as there may be parts of the plan that contain proprietary or confidential information. And as the business plan moves toward completion, consider transitioning the steering committee into an advisory committee role that will provide advice and resources during plan implementation and business operation. So next slide, please. So next, we're going to look at community involvement in enterprises operated by a tribe and in enterprises implemented by a native corporation. It could be a tribal native corporation or a native corporation from one of our communities, non-tribal communities. Tribal council. First of all, we're going to talk about tribal council directed ventures, and we're really talking about ventures that are operated by the tribes themselves, and some tribes are still doing this, having a part of its economic development department responsible for implementing and operating enterprises. So if that's the case, if that's what we got going, we're going to build community access. How are we going to keep community involved here? We're going to build community access through scheduled and publicized open door hours. We're going to build community outreach into operational procedures, have a community member presentation agenda item at each tribal council meeting. We are going to have steering committee or advisory board membership and access, and hold periodic public meetings. Members of the committee, members of the steering committee or advisory committee are going to hold those meetings with their constituents as well as with the public. They're not going to be just a we sit and listen to ourselves kind of committee. The steering committees or advisory committees with representation from the community on that committee, those reps are going to go into the community, get information from the community on what they think should be happening, report to the community on what the findings, current findings and direction are that the enterprise is moving, and how do they feel about that. Bring that information back to the standing committee or advisory committee, get that in, or sorry, the steering committee or advisory committee, and get that information to to the tribal council. Attend and offer presentations at community meetings and recruit candidates from the community to fill membership slots in the steering or advisory committee. Standing committee usually deals with specific important issues. For instance, a culture committee might be a standing culture committee would be created to review potential venture practices that had some cultural component to them or impact associated with them. It had looked at such possible enterprises as marketing kachina dolls, for example. That standing committee would have community representation on it. That's one of the ways that community be involved. It would hold community meetings. It would attend and offer presentation at meetings, recruit candidates from the community. And then the organization itself, the tribal organization. In addition to the points listed above, the tribe would engage in surveys, public hearings, newsletters, other community appropriate outreach and connection activities to keep the community involved in what was going on in terms of its economic development work in the specific venture areas or plans that were being laid for economic development, and to get community input on those plans or operations. Okay, next slide. Corporate boards. If we're talking about a tribal corporation or a native corporation, the board members themselves, community member representation on the board, steering committee, we've talked about how this steering committee works. Standing committees, talked about that a little bit. Oh, let's just touch on market here. A standing committee. One standing committee that you may want to really think about is a standing committee that focuses on marketing related issues. I can remember wandering through, I was working on a res and looking at some of the buildings that were out and about, and walking into this huge building to see what was inside, and inside was an empty space. For a lot of the space was nothing, and then stacked all around. The walls of the building were big piles of cattle guards. Cattle guards are sort of gate-like things that are placed on access points from access roads onto highways, public roads, to keep cattle from open range from wandering onto the highways. And the tribe had gotten funding to put together a venture that dealt with creating, manufacturing, and marketing cattle guards. They did a great job, marvelous job of the manufacturing. Did not do much work with the marketing component of the plan prior to implementation. They hadn't included members, they didn't have a marketing committee that included, for instance, for that project, that venture, reps from the tribe and from state highway division, from county road supervisor positions, from private access road representatives. None of that was done to find out what kind of a market they could look at locally and in the region. Marketing issues are often the most challenging component of business operation in the native world, and take a look at a standing committee for marketing as you move forward with your project. So board meetings, corporate board directed ventures, board meetings themselves, community member presentation item on the board agenda. Outreach certainly is going to happen. Presentations at social or special interest group gatherings, newsletters, recruitment of community members for board membership. Those are really important pieces of how community engagement can happen, will happen, should happen, if the venture is something that's is operated by a native corporation. Next slide, please. Okie-do, strategic planning. Now, we talked about what a strategic plan is, a 3 to 5 year plan that outlines the venture activities that the organization is going to take a look at doing in that time period, and what steps are going to follow in each of those explorations. So if we're talking about the internal market, strategic planning regarding an internal market within the community, a market within the community, then let's take a look at assessing current demand and project demand for potential goods and services in a variety of ventures, internal ventures in the community. For ventures that are focused on or primarily focused inside the community, community members can be part of that analysis that asks them to share recommendations, requests for goods or services they identify. They also could participate in a targeted population analysis, and we'll take a look at a form to use in doing that analysis in a minute or two. So there's the strategic planning regarding internal market, strategic planning regarding external market, and the second track you can use in both, and should use in both internal and external market. The second strategic planning track, and that track focuses on structures and operation of potential structures, community members and community involvement in this particular piece, the structural piece. Should include the work of steering committees and advisory boards, as well as special and standing committees. And two of the community engagement processes we determined earlier, focus groups and nominal group process, can be used to involve the community in this component of strategic planning. Issues that'll be covered in this track, in this second track of planning for a venture, include, and this is for internal and external markets, include clearly defining customers for each venture that you have in the plan, identifying the markets that each potential business will operate in, identifying the importance of technology for each venture, identifying concerns for survival, growth, and profitability in each venture, critical issues for each venture, the economic objectives for each venture, describing the beliefs, aspiration, and values associated with each venture, identifying competitive strengths, describing concerns for public image, social, community, and environmental issues for each venture, and finally, providing details on the importance of and access to employees and employee labor force for each venture. Effective work in this strategic plan component helps build a sustainable enterprise. And sustainability should be a major focus of your business plan. This kind of analysis helps build that. In external markets, community member involvement in external markets include and mainly focus on participation in steering committees, advisory boards, special and standing committee memberships. Okay, and finally and at last, next slide, please. Individual business plans. And this one is a pretty straightforward kind of community engagement level of operation. It largely involving customer and market assessment. So community member involvement is largely in that arena when it comes to individual business plans. Next slide. And the last part of this presentation, I talked about a target population analysis that you can use for business opportunity assessment. for internal, particularly for internal market work. A wealth leakage field. How much money is going out of our community for groceries? How much is our community spending out in surrounding areas for purchase of groceries? Is there a market that we can focus on there? Do we have a housing, home repair, home and structural repair operations? How much of that's going on in the community, and how much of it is, and how much of that is going to external firms, businesses? Is there a market in our community for that kind of activity? Fuel and auto supplies. Gas station convenience store operations. Is there a market for something like that? How much is going out of our community in that arena? Go through this and take a look at the areas where we're losing a lot of resources, a lot of market, a lot of cash is going out of our community to outside vendors, and see whether or not it's something we want to move to an internal focus on. And so next slide, please. And on to.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and try and have a poll right now. So this is really around your efforts you've made to incorporate community engagement into your business planning process. So if you could share with us some of the ways that you have incorporated some of these things Dan talked about into your business planning process. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Yes, someone mentioned that we should have put that we haven't started any of these, but that's part of the reason we shared is so if you hadn't thought about it, these are some ways that you can engage the community in your process. Okay, we have, that takes us to questions. Next slide, please. We've had a few people ask about receiving the slides. The slides will be available. So at the beginning of next week, we'll be able to share a link with you that will provide you with the slide deck and also the resources toolkit, which we'll describe in just a little bit. And I'll also ask for folks, if you don't have questions to put in the chat, we don't mind comments at all, but please keep it to the topic at hand, and that'll be really helpful. Thank you. So we're going to go to the next slide, please. Okay, we're going to start here by talking about business development plan components and how to use a business plan. We're running a little behind on time, so we'll try and get through this as quickly as possible while being able to answer any questions if they should come up. So next slide, please. And I'm going to turn this over to Rondell Clay, who is with the ANA Regional Training and Technical Assistance Center for the Western region. Rondell?
Good afternoon, everyone. Taking time to consider the types of information and how long it's going to take to get that information gathered is one of the things that you need to start thinking about right from the beginning before you even begin to develop your writing plan, because you're going to need that information in order to put your business plan together. Next slide, please. A business plan is essentially a planning and education tool. You can use it when you need to build the framework for your new or existing enterprise and set goals for your business. For example, you can use it when launching a company, transitioning from freelancing to owning a small business, or improving your current business. A business plan can also be used to help secure funding from investors. You can use your business plan as a way to present your ideas, sales projection, and plans for achieving your objectives to multiple audiences. Next slide. So who needs a business plan? Basically, anyone with a new or existing business should have a business plan. which will act as a map to achieving their company's goals and strategies. This includes sole proprietorships, general partnerships, limited liability companies, and even corporations will find a business plan useful. Also, the business plan should be seen as your guide and map to what your business looks like overall. Next slide, please. The business plan generally projects between 3 to 5 years ahead and outlines the route a company intends to take to reach its yearly milestones, including revenue projections. According to your need, you can create 2 types of business plans. One is a simple business plan, normally just a few pages. It is the other is a comprehensive business plan that provides an in-depth analysis regarding funding, market analysis, organizational planning, etc. Comprehensive is much more detailed for larger ventures, and it can be up to over 100 pages long. Next slide, please. A simple business plan covers everything you need to consider when launching a side gig, solo operation, or small business. The main difference between the small business versus an investor-funded business is the market research and operational financial details needed to support your plan. A simple business plan still needs to have all the components, just in a more concise format. Next slide, please. A comprehensive business plan is the type of plan that is referred to as a traditional business plan. This plan is much more detailed than the simple plan and takes more time to write. If you are looking at lending institutions or investors, this is the best plan for you to have. Next slide, please. The length of a business plan, again, depends on the type of business you are developing. The more you put into your business plan, the more your business will gain in developing a clear strategy right from the start. Next slide, please. Using community involvement and as well as the involvement of people with expertise that you need to help you get your business going, team approach is a good way of gathering information and conducting the planning process for putting your business plan together. Next slide. There are numerous business templates to consider when writing your business plan. We do have some templates in the resource guide that we will share with you after this presentation that you can view. Having a template will help to organize each step in your development, and depending on the type of business you are developing will determine overall how your plan will turn out. Take time to explore the different types of online business templates available and which one will fit the best based on your business type. Next slide.
Thank you, Rondell. In this section, we'll go into the business plan development and cover the most common development components. Next slide, please. What are the most common components of a business plan? This includes starting off with 1, a business description and mission statement. Number 2, an executive summary. And number 3, a competitor's analysis. Number 4, a financial plan. And number 5, a product or service detail description. Number 6, a marketing strategy. Number 7, an operations overview. And number 8, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, which is also known as SWOT. Next slide, please. Starting with your business description and mission statement, summarize your business's history, ownership, and mission or vision statement. Be very specific and list out the consumers, the organization, or businesses your business company plans to service. Explain the competitive advantages that will make your business a success. Questions to ask yourself include, are there experts on your team? Have you found the perfect location for your business? Think about what is unique in this area. And also your company business description is the best place to highlight and bring forward your business strengths. Next slide, please. The executive summary is a pared down version of your larger document and provides a quick overview. For an executive summary to be effective, you will need to focus on your audience and think about who will be reading it and what information is important for them to read and learn about your business. For example, summarize your company with an overview of your management structure, a description of your product or services, your goals, and a summary of your finances, marketing strategy, and why it will be successful. Preparing an engaging statement will also help funders and stakeholders connect to your business and better understand your overall business plan directives. Next slide, please. So echoing the executive summary, this brings us to a business plan development tip to write your executive summary last. Reason being, you will have all your other business components developed to write your overall summary. Some attempt to write it first thinking it would be guiding the plan, but actually find that they need to go back and make changes based on more development in the other components. Next slide, please. A competitor's analysis will help you determine if there is a need in the marketplace for your product or service. This includes who will be most likely to buy your products or services and determines where your customers are located. Competitive research will show you what other businesses are doing and what their strengths are. This will be helpful in designing and formulating your plan. In your market research, also look for trends and themes. Utilize these questions in your research as well. What do successful competitors do? And why does it work? And how can you do it better? Next slide, please. Your financial plan may include your company's income, and if you have your profit and loss statements, include those as well. Also share insights on how you plan to grow your revenue and what you expect to earn in 3 to 5 years. It can also encompass your capital requirements, which you can also use to pitch your ideas to potential investors. In that case, you may describe the investment amount you require and how you plan to repay the capital. Next slide, please. In detailing your products and services, you want to break down what your product or service is, include its unique features, and keep in mind future products that you want to develop. Also think about how your product or service benefits your target customer, and provide a detailed description of what you will be selling to your customers. Next slide, please. Your marketing strategy is how you plan to get your product or service in front of your customers. This section of the business plan is where you can include your ideas for online or traditional methods of market promotion, as well as how you physically plan to sell your product or service. Questions to ask yourself in development is, will this be done through brick or mortar or e-commerce or a combination of the two? Use this section to develop your strategy in creating a viable plan that works for your products and services. Next slide, please. An operations overview provides a glimpse into your business's daily operations, including management, human resources, your physical operational facility, and any production methods. Also, questions to consider in developing your operations overview is your business location and who owns it. What are the lease terms? What will be required to get it ready for any zoning, permitting, or construction improvements? And if you'll need like any furnishings, fixtures, equipment, and other supplies. Other areas to look at include inventory and who will your vendors be, and how will you track the inventory? These are just some of the questions to ask yourself in the development of your operations plan. Also, an area which is often overlooked is to consider including a section on emergency preparedness. Next slide, please. A SWOT analysis evaluates these specific aspects of your business plan development. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. In this process, you can really look at visually what the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. This is an excellent analysis to use that helps you to evaluate and look at these areas to determine current status and other areas of improvement and growth. Next slide, please. Another business development writing tip is, in conducting a SWOT, what you put into it will determine your overall business analysis. So take time to be thorough and take a good look at the action areas, especially the weaknesses, which are hard to look at, but can help you strategize and what you need to do for future development. Next slide, please. And at this time, I'm going to hand this back over to my colleague, Rondell.
Thank you very much. So how do you use a business plan? The primary use of a business plan is to provide a detailed description of your business structure and the feasibility of your business so that you can secure funding from outside sources, but it also provides a blueprint for setting up the operation of the business. So you'll be taking things to the bank. That's your primary source of funding, should be banks, venture capitalists, private investors. Your secondary source should be government grants or foundation funds, which are more competitive. Well, they're competitive and take a time to develop the relationships to get. I would also like to ask Dan if he would chime in on this topic. Dan?
I will. Thank you, Rondell. So back in the day again, working with a timber enterprise, we started out exporting. We were exporting our logs. We exported to Japan. And then we started looking at, well, what could we do if we wanted to make a much better profit on doing some of the milling ourselves and marketing. And we did the plan, the milling marketing plan, and we did a very thorough plan. Ended up securing, as Rondell said, I really want to emphasize this, going after the hard money, going after bank financing, investor financing, not looking at soft money, government funds and foundations, going after the hard money, able to access the hard money, got a great line of credit. We were able to pick up a mill that had just sort of been sitting there, not doing anything for a while. Retooled that mill so it could do hard logs and soft logs and big and small logs. We're able to work through a sustained yield approach on tribal timberlands, and some commercial harvesting on other sites from other entities to supply the support we needed in terms of raw material. And all of that was due to an effectively designed and effectively developed, a well-constructed and implemented business plan. That's a great example of how a business plan can work. So we also were working on with another venture enterprise that was our evergreen enterprise, and it basically had, the great thing about it was employing a lot of tribal members doing things that seemed that they enjoyed doing. Getting slough, getting sword fern, marketing those products to florist operations, peeling chittum and getting Mahonia root, Oregon grape root, that have those items have medical purposes, and trying to market that. We had plenty of stuff coming in terms of product. We were great at creating product. We did not have the business plan put together we needed to have to do the marketing. We had not done the work we needed to do in that arena. So yeah, the story is, please work on that business plan. It's not something to use just for a short period of time. It's a longer term document. It needs to have some detail. Use it for hard investment. Use it for implementation. That's what you're going to want to do with your business plan.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Rondell. Next slide, please. So this brings us to questions. There's a lot of dialogue in the chat, and I appreciate you all throwing your ideas and thoughts in and talking to one another. There aren't a lot of questions. There was one question in here: incubators or accelerators, which one's better? I am not equipped to answer that question, but I will ask Dan if he has an opinion about it, since he's been involved with different types of services to get businesses off the ground. Dan, do you have an answer to that question?
I don't. I don't have an answer to that question, because it really depends on what we're talking about in terms of targeted activities. It really depends upon what we're talking about in terms of the community, and it really depends on what we're looking at in terms of potential market. So go through and do an analysis in those arenas, and then ask yourself that question.
Okay, thank you.
Christine, I have a response, if you could let me.
Oh yeah, please go ahead, Denise.
Sure, be happy to. So, our office has funded 10 business incubators last year. And so the direction that we're taking is supporting that effort to make sure that they can be successful with pursuing businesses in that model. So, I don't necessarily have a recommendation, because I don't know the specifics about your business interests. But at the same time, we are really looking forward to being able to generate some valuable data from our incubators so that we can provide information in the country about what's worked for us, what we've undertaken. And I would say, be patient. It's a 3 to 6 year program that we're engaging in. It takes a while to get businesses up and running. So we want to make sure that, we're providing data that's going to be meaningful. So stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more to say about those in the future.
Thank you, Denise. And just to let you all know, there's a lot happening with these two parts of this webinar, but the grantees that Denise just referenced, we have a map of those, and we'll be able to share that with you in the Business Plan Development Resources Toolkit. So more to come. It's not just these webinars, but we have a whole slew of resources to share with you following each part of this webinar. So thanks again, Denise. There's another question, and Dan, I'm wondering if you or Rondell has a good answer for this. Is there a sample template community survey that asks tribal members what businesses they'd like to see in their community? Of course, one could develop this themselves, but do you have any ideas of anything that you could recommend or any approaches you might recommend besides what's already been discussed? Either Dan or Rondell.
Rondell, I'm on the line right now. Is there anything you want to toss into the mix?
Go ahead, Dan. I
Okay.
don't have any templates that I'm aware of.
Okay. If the person who is asking that question would just send me an email at Dan Van Otten, DANVANOTTEN @gmail.com. I'll pull together some stuff that I've got in my files from tribes, from different things that have come out of work I've done in the past.
Thank you, Dan. So that was Tawny. If you heard that, we can get Dan's email is in there. So just look for that in the chat. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on. If anyone else has questions, be sure to enter them in the chat. And again, there's a lot of discussion in there. We do have a second part to this, so I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, so moving on to objective 3, we're going to talk a little bit about mentoring and resources. And we just started talking about resources, but we'll talk just a tiny bit more about that. So next slide, please. All right, so mentoring provides the opportunity to access expert business mentors who are dedicated to help businesses plan, launch, manage, and grow a business. Many of the programs include trainings, webinars, online workshops, courses on demand, and online resources. Additional information on mentorship opportunities will be available to you in the Business Plan Development Resources Toolkit that I just mentioned. So next slide, please. Just a sample of some of the mentoring options that are out there. Again, we'll include a map with those, they're called Indian Business Incubator Program Grant Awards through the Office of Indian Economic Development. And someone had asked who Denise is with. Denise is with the Office of Indian Economic Development, and she is the branch chief for the Division of Economic Development. So that Division of Economic Development awarded, as Denise said, 10 Indian Business Incubator programs, which will take some time to get off the ground, but we'll start offering services pretty quickly within the first 6 months of awards. So we'll have a map of those, and if any of you can access those resources, you'll be able to check out the map and see where they are and see if any of them are located in your area. So some of the other options for mentoring, SCORE is a nonprofit, and they offer free business advice from mentors who know what it's like to be a small business owner. The U.S. Small Business Administration, excellent resource, provides a network of partners and offers free to low-cost counseling and training in your area. There will be a link to identify where the Small Business Development Center in your area is. So you'll be able to click on the link, go to a map, and then put in your state and find in your county and find the nearest Small Business Development Center that SPA offers. And then we have a link to America's Small Business Development Center. It's a blog article, and it talks about the best websites for entrepreneurs. And then you also can find the mentoring resource. There's many free options. I mentioned SCORE, which allows you to search for and interact with mentors in your area and your industry. And they'll educate you on small business best practices and provide valuable advice. There's another one called Growth Mentor, and it's best for startup founders, and offers virtual one-on-one interaction with industry experts to help you vet ideas, troubleshoot issues, overcome obstacles, and more. And then Pellon, P-E-L-L-O-N, again, you'll have links to all these, sets you up with a weekly or monthly call with a mentor who can offer you support. So there's a lot of mentoring options, and we will definitely be sharing them with you. I see that there's some questions in the chat. Resources for retired military grants loans. We can make sure to include some of the resources for retired military. They're going to be similar, but I think the Veterans Administration does have additional resources we can add to the toolkit. The toolkit will be available, by the way, next week, and you'll have access to everything there. Does the U.S. Small Business Administration work with businesses registered as tribal businesses? I'm not going to answer that. I believe it's a yes, but is there anyone on the line that knows for sure whether the U.S. Small Business Administration works with businesses registered as tribal businesses? Denise or Rondell or Dan?
I believe yes. The answer to that, I think, is yes.
Okay, I think so too. There's some really good people are posting resources in there as well locally, and so do take a look at the chat. Where do I find information on getting a business license when living on sovereign tribal land? That's a good question. Does any of the panelists have an answer to that? Dan?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Where do I find information on getting a business license when living on sovereign tribal land?
It depends on the tribe, but a lot of times there'll be a licensing department, division, office in the tribe's economic development or corporate development department. It depends on which tribe it is and what their organizational structure is. But if you need to find, try going to the tribal council office and asking at that point for that specific tribe, whichever tribe you're talking about, where in this tribe, where in our tribe, your tribe, am I able to secure a license for doing business on tribal trust territory?
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, some other folks had some comments too, specifically referring to their tribal process. There are some notes in there too. Thank you for all the engagement, everyone. It's really nice. So we're going to go to the next slide, and there's another poll. And what we'd like to know is, for those of you with experience in developing a business, I know there are some online, what types of resources have you utilized? And let me go ahead and launch that poll. Okay. So the poll's been launched. We'll just leave that up there for about 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll, and then Terry, if you wouldn't mind sharing the results, that'd be great. And then if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is the Business Plan Development Resources Toolkit I was speaking of earlier. It'll be available early next week. We will send an email out to everyone on the call, and you'll get a link to the slide deck and also to the resources toolkit. And you'll find different things in there. There are articles, there are useful templates that you can download and use for free. Depending on your industry, you can find templates for your industry. So there's a whole wide array of templates. And then there are federal, tribal, and other resources. Someone mentioned wanting to know a little bit more about how to structure yourself as a business. And we do have a handbook that is included in the resources toolkit as well. So there's a lot to look for in there and peruse through, and hopefully you'll find it very helpful. I'm just looking to see, again, more information and resources, good stuff in the chat. So pay attention to the chat, just making sure I don't miss anything there. And then next slide, please. So today, so we really hope you'll join us for part 2, which is on Thursday. And we'll be focused on some of the things that came up in the chat. So business growth concepts and strategies, community funding resources, federal funding resources, mentoring and technical assistance. Next slide, please. So for this webinar, we have covered different ways to engage with the community. What is a business plan and who needs one? Common components of a business plan. Types of business plans, whether simple or comprehensive, how to write one, what to include, mentorship opportunities, our next training date, and then a bit about the resources toolkit. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and before we put the participant survey link into the chat, Kelly, I'd like to invite anyone we had a lot of people register with some expertise in having developed a business. For anyone like that, that has some common best practices to share with those that are here, participating in this webinar, or common challenges and how you overcame them. If you wouldn't mind sharing those in the chat, that would be fantastic. What we plan to do is create, if we get enough information, we're going to do this in part 2 as well. We're going to create a participant best practice tips resource, and that will also be included in the resources toolkit. So anyone that has good information they'd like to share, please go ahead and put your notes into the chat, and we'll include that into the resources toolkit. And then Kelly, if you wouldn't mind putting the participant survey into the chat box, people can access that very easily. It's not very long. If you wouldn't mind just taking a couple of minutes to answer those questions. And it will remain up. If you click on the link, you can leave that up on your screens or on your devices, and you can answer it in a little bit if you want to. Okay.
The survey has been put into the chat, so everyone can access that now.
Next slide, please. Next one. So this is an opportunity for any final questions. We have a few minutes. If there are any. And someone asked about the recording. Yes, there will be a recording made available, and we'll be able to send you a link to that recording once it's available. We have some processing we need to do, so it's more like a couple weeks out once we finish this part and the second part on Thursday. But we will send and share that information with you. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Denise to send us off for now until Thursday.
I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank everyone for joining. I hope you all found this information helpful. Our next day is Thursday, March 9th. Same time, we'll be covering business sustainability. Look forward to everyone joining again. We'll be around for a few more minutes if people have questions, but otherwise this will conclude our webinar. Thanks for joining. Take care.